The moment I stepped onto the porch, I told myself to smile. Just keep smiling, Angelica. It's their night, not yours. I carried the bouquet of lilies carefully in one arm and the blue gift bag in the other, both trembling slightly with my hands. The lilies were white and soft, their scent just faint enough to be graceful, not overwhelming. I had picked them up fresh from the florist that morning. Dominica always said lilies were her favorite flower. And the gift? A framed photo from their wedding that I'd had restored and printed on delicate pearl paper, with a small note in my own handwriting tucked behind it. I'd written that letter at the kitchen table late at night, 2 cups of tea gone cold while I tried to get the words right. I didn't want to overdo it. I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who tried too hard, who made it about her. But I wanted them to know I remembered, that I cared. 15 years married. That had to mean something. When I stepped into their home, the warm scent of roasted chicken and rosemary filled the air. Dominica had gone all out. Linen napkins, white dishes with gold trim, wine already poured. The dining room was set for 10. It wasn't extravagant, not flashy like she sometimes preferred, but still curated to impress. Candles in hurricane glass holders flickered down the table. Jazz played low from the speakers in the living room. "Angelica!" Dominica's voice rang out as she crossed the foyer. She kissed me on the cheek without touching me and stepped back. "Right on time!" Her smile was wide, practiced. I offered the flowers and gift bag. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart. I hope the evening's everything you dreamed." She took the flowers like someone accepting a utility bill. "Lilies! Lovely!" Then, to no one in particular, "Can someone find a vase?" Elon appeared just behind her, handsome in his button-down shirt, hair gelled like he used to wear it in college. "Hi, Ma." He gave me a quick hug, more like an arm press. "Glad you could make it." Of course I could. I always did. Every year, every birthday, every holiday, every scraped-together dinner I was invited to last minute. I came. I followed them into the dining room, heart fluttering. I hadn't seen most of the guests in a while. Dominica's 2 sisters, both tall and sharp, their husbands leaning over drinks, and a few friends from Elon's office, all young and polished, just like Dominica liked it. I sat quietly through the first course, listened to Elon talk about the latest marketing contract his firm had landed, watched Dominica float around the table, topping off wine, adjusting cutlery, laughing at everything slightly louder than needed. The room spun politely around them, and I stayed in my place at the far end of the table, smiling when someone made eye contact, nodding when Dominica looked my way. It was just before dessert when I got up to use the restroom. That's when it happened. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even listening at first. I was coming down the hallway, and the guest bathroom was occupied, so I paused just outside the kitchen. Dominica's voice was unmistakable, a few feet away, through the open pantry door. She was talking to her sister and one of her friends, Laura, I think, the one who always wore too much perfume and not enough sincerity. "She brought lilies again," Dominica said, her voice full of mock surprise. "Every single year, like it's still 2009. I swear I don't know what to do with them." Laura chuckled. "At least she brought flowers. My mother-in-law used to bring Tupperware." "Oh, trust me," Dominica went on, lowering her voice only slightly. "Flowers are harmless. It's the way she just lingers around, like some shadow, watching everything, like she's waiting for someone to clap for her." They all laughed. Then Dominica said it, casually, like a sigh, like it had been sitting on her chest for years. "I swear, if someone asked me what I wanted most tonight, not a ring, not a trip, not even a quiet moment, it would be this, that she would just disappear. Like really, just fade out of our lives. That would be the greatest gift." My hand touched the wall to steady myself. "I mean, Islan won't say it," she continued, "but I know he feels it too. She's this burden, this constant weight. She never does anything exactly wrong, but her whole presence just drains the room." Laura muttered something I didn't catch, but they laughed again. And I stood there like a fool, a statue with shaking knees and a crushed lily petal clinging to her sleeve. I backed away quietly, heart pounding like it had when Ilon was a baby with a fever, and I'd run to the ER barefoot. That kind of panic, but worse. Because this wasn't illness. This wasn't something I could fix. I returned to the table before anyone noticed I'd been gone long. The bathroom was free by then, but I didn't go in. I didn't cry. I sat back in my seat and picked up my glass. Someone was serving dessert. A pear tart Dominica made herself, plated with precision. She was beaming across the room as people complimented the crust. I stared at her face. So perfect, so composed, so beloved by her guests. The same face that had, not 10 minutes ago, said she wished I would vanish. As if I were something to be cleaned off a table. A stain. Elon looked my way briefly as he passed around coffee. "Everything good, Ma?" I smiled. I nodded. Of course. Everything was fine. I was just the quiet one in the corner. The burden who never did anything exactly wrong. I reached for the plate in front of me and took a bite of the tart. It tasted like nothing. The laughter around the table felt distant now, muffled and hollow. Someone clinked their glass for a toast. Dominica thanked everyone for coming, said how grateful she was to share her marriage with people who understood the meaning of family. The word hit me like a bruise. I clapped with the rest of them. I smiled. But inside, something was slipping. Not just pain, not just betrayal. Something deeper. The part of me that had always believed my place in Elon's life was safe, earned, protected. Dominica had wished me away. And Elon, I didn't know. But I would find out. I stayed through dessert. I said nothing. I waited. But I wouldn't forget. And I wouldn't leave yet. The lights from the dining room spilled into the yard like a halo around a place I no longer belonged to. The laughter kept flowing through the open sliding glass door, soft and sharp at once, the way wind can whistle past your ears when it's cold enough to sting. I stood by the window for a few seconds after dessert, pretending to look at the garden. But really, I was watching Elon, the way he leaned back in his chair, drink in hand, smiling like a man with no weight on his shoulders. I waited until Dominica brought out the anniversary cake, and all the attention swung her way. Then I slipped through the glass door, letting the night air rush in to meet me. The grass was damp under my shoes. The hydrangeas by the fence were blooming in soft clusters, and the string lights hung above the patio twinkled like the evening had no idea what was happening beneath it. I stood quietly by the rose bushes, holding the edge of my cardigan closed with one hand, until I saw Elon come outside. He wasn't alone. 2 of his friends trailed behind him. Cameron and Jake, I think. They'd grown up with him since grade school, now middle-aged men, with beer in their laughter and expensive watches on their wrists. "Elon," I said, before I could convince myself not to. He turned. "Ma?" I didn't want an audience, but I also wasn't going to wait anymore. "Can we talk?" Cameron looked between us and chuckled. "We'll give you a minute," he said, though he didn't move. Ilon exhaled, already tired. "Sure, what's wrong?" I stepped closer. My throat closed for a second. "I overheard something, in the kitchen." His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't speak. "I heard Dominica say her greatest wish was that I disappear, that I'm a burden, that I linger like a shadow." Elon rubbed the back of his neck. "Jesus. I just want to know," I said quietly. "Is that how you feel too?" He looked at me, and what I saw wasn't regret. It wasn't shame. It was the look he used to give me when I told him no at the candy aisle when he was 10. Resentment laced with pride. "You want me to be honest?" he asked. "Yes." "Then yeah. Sometimes I do feel that way." The words landed sharp and fast, but they didn't knock the wind out of me. They just made the ground feel unfamiliar. "I'm tired of always feeling like I owe you something, Ma," he said, louder now, voice loosening in front of his audience. "You always expect something in return, my attention, my time, my presence. Even your gifts feel like guilt trips. You give, but there's always a string. I never asked for anything back, I said, my voice low. I just wanted to be part of your life. And that's the problem, he snapped. You insert yourself. You call 3 times a week. You ask questions like you're still raising me. You don't even realize how controlling you are, do you? I asked if you were eating enough, I said, stunned. I asked if the twins were sleeping through the night. Exactly. He laughed bitterly. You mother me like I'm 12. You always have. Dominica sees it. That's why she says what she says. Dominica humiliates me, I said. Tonight wasn't the first time. She's honest, he said flatly. At least she doesn't pretend. You play the martyr. That's your thing. Always wounded. Always misunderstood. I opened my mouth, but before I could form a single word, Cameron chimed in from behind him. Man, she's still pulling that routine? Elon didn't even glance at him. She's been doing it since I got my learner's permit. Remember that fight about which route to take to school? She cried for 2 hours. Jake chuckled. Classic Angelica. Tears first, logic never. Elon turned back to me with a shrug that nearly undid me. They know, everyone knows. It's not just us. The patio door was still open. I could see Dominica inside, standing by the cake, her eyes flicking toward us now and then, but never with concern. Just satisfaction. You blame me, I said slowly, for the man you are now? He shrugged again. You shaped me. You hovered. You made me soft, afraid to fail. Dominica had to teach me how to live like a grown man. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was full of echoes. Every scraped knee I patched, every night I stayed up sewing costumes, every call I made when he didn't respond for days. All the effort, all the giving, turned into a weapon pointed back at me. Something in me broke, but it wasn't my heart. It was that last bit of warmth. What rose in its place wasn't pain, and it wasn't confusion. It was something cold, something steady. I nodded, just once. All right. That's it? He asked. That's it, I said. You've said what you needed to say. So have I. I turned and walked away before they could laugh again, before they could say anything more that would live in my memory like mildew in wallpaper. Back through the sliding door, past the guests, past Dominica, who raised an eyebrow as I passed, as if curious how broken I looked now. I didn't stop to explain. I walked down the hall, past the bathroom, where I'd once bandaged Dominica's hand when she cut herself on a wine glass, past the photo of Elon as a child in the hallway frame. My hand reached for the doorknob of the guest room, the one they always referred to as Mom's room when company was around, but the extra room the rest of the time. I shut the door softly behind me, sat on the edge of the bed, and folded my hands in my lap. The walls were pale blue, the blankets neatly folded. A single photo of the twins on the nightstand, probably staged there for me. It smelled faintly of lavender and air freshener. Not home, not warmth. I stared at my reflection in the window. My silver hair, my hands spotted with age, my eyes still dry. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I was done. Done asking, done waiting, done pretending this was anything like love. The mirror in the guest room was the same one I'd used to fix Elon's bow tie before his junior prom. I remembered the moment clearly, how his hands trembled and how he kept pulling at the collar of his cheap rented suit. I'd stood behind him, brushing the dust off his shoulders, smiling like it was the happiest moment of my life. Back then, it had been. Now, in the same reflection, I saw someone I barely recognized. The face looking back at me was tired, not just from age or the evening, but from the kind of fatigue that builds when you've been holding in your breath for years. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her. Me, the mother who gave everything, the woman who fed other people's dreams while starving her own. My face looked soft in the lamplight, but I saw the tightness around my mouth, the faint lines carved deep from swallowing too many words. What kind of woman stands silently while her daughter-in-law calls her a burden? What kind of mother lets her son blame her for the man he's become? The kind who thought love was enough. That's who. But I was done waiting for their love. I looked around the room, this carefully prepared little guest box. Lavender air freshener, stiff linens, a picture of the twins, framed but with a price tag still stuck to the bottom. Everything staged for the illusion that I belonged. I stood up and walked to the dresser. On top of it, the family photo from Elon and Dominica's wedding stared back at me. I picked it up. I was on the edge, cropped just enough that I looked like a guest. I thought back to that day. They'd seated me near the kitchen at the reception. Dominica's parents were center stage, smiling like royalty, while I held my little paper program and pretended not to notice that Elon hadn't danced with me once. The insults hadn't started today. They'd been collecting like dust, settling into the corners of my life. The first time Dominica mocked me publicly was over dinner. 8 years ago. I'd brought Elon a gift for his promotion, a watch that Noel had worn, one I'd saved for years. She'd laughed in front of the table, saying, "Oh, vintage. How sentimental. Elon prefers smartwatches now." He'd said nothing, just nodded, like he agreed. Then there was the car. The silver sedan I'd given Elon after Noel passed. "We don't really do sedans," Dominica had said, like I'd offered them a rotary phone. They sold it within weeks, never even told me. On holidays, I was the woman who made too much food, who asked too many questions, who took too many pictures with her old camera. "Angelica, no one prints photos anymore," Dominica had whispered once, taking the camera out of my hands as I was trying to capture the kids unwrapping gifts. And Elon, he changed in front of me, slowly. He stopped calling me Mama. He stopped hugging me in public. He stopped standing up for me. And I let him. I convinced myself he was just adjusting to marriage, to fatherhood, to life. But that wasn't it. He'd just adjusted to life without me in it. I stood in front of the mirror now, feeling something rise in me. Not grief, not even anger, something sharper, something that had been sleeping. It was time to act. If Dominica wanted me to disappear from her life, then so be it. But I would go out on my own terms. I walked out of the guest room and down the hallway. The music was still playing in the dining room, the laughter still floating on the air like perfume. I could see Dominica near the kitchen now, holding a wine glass like a queen at court, laughing at something someone had said. Elon leaned against the wall, drink in hand, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. A microphone stood at the head of the dining table, left there for the toast Elon gave earlier. I walked over and picked it up. Someone saw me and smiled, raising a glass. I didn't smile back. I tapped the microphone once. The speakers crackled. Conversations quieted. I took a slow breath. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, steady and calm. "If I could have your attention." All heads turned. Dominica blinked, surprised. Elon narrowed his eyes. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate Elon and Dominica's 15th wedding anniversary tonight," I began. "It's been lovely watching all of you enjoy yourselves. The music, the food, the stories." A few people smiled. Some raised glasses again. "But I'm afraid the party is now over." A murmur rippled through the room. Confused looks, shifts in posture. Even the music still playing in the background suddenly felt out of place. Dominica stepped forward, laughing awkwardly. "Oh, Angelica, what do you mean? The night's still young." "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "It's finished." Elon chuckled from across the room. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm ending this party," I said, raising my voice slightly. "And I'm asking everyone here to leave." Laughter, nervous and scattered. "Are you serious?" someone whispered to Dominica. Elon walked closer. "Come on, Ma, don't do this. Not tonight. Don't make a scene." I turned to face him fully. "You already made the scene, out there, in the yard, with your friends, with your mouth." His smile faded. "You want honesty, Elon?" I asked. "You want me to stop playing the martyr? Fine. Here's honesty. This is my house." He blinked. "What?" I turned slowly, addressing the room. This house, the one you're all standing in, was bought by me and my husband in 1988. It's in my name. It was gifted to Elon and Dominica as a gesture of trust, but it was never signed over. Not fully, not legally. I paid the taxes. I paid the maintenance. Every upgrade, paid with my retirement savings. So when I say it's mine, I don't mean that metaphorically. Now the silence was real. Elon opened his mouth, then closed it. Dominica took a step forward. You're lying. I'm not, I said simply. I just never thought I'd have to say it out loud. I was trying to be generous, to make room, to make space for your marriage, your family. But now that I've been told I'm a burden, a shadow, something that should disappear, I've decided to make your wish come true. I turned back to the crowd. So again, thank you for coming, but the party's over. You need to leave. Now. Elon's voice broke the silence, sharp and disbelieving. You're out of your mind. No, I said quietly. I've finally come to my senses. You can't just... I can, I said, my voice rising. And I am. You're being emotional. No, I replied. I was emotional in the hallway. I was emotional when Dominica mocked my flowers. When you told your friends I ruined your life. Now I'm something else. I'm resolved. Dominica scoffed, still gripping her wine glass like it might defend her. You think people are just going to leave because you said so? I do, I said, walking toward the front door. Because if they don't, I'll call the police and inform them that a group of people is trespassing on my private property. A hush fell. Someone coughed. A chair scraped. Elon stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. You're serious, he whispered. I nodded. Dominica's voice was tight. You're kicking us out of our own party. No, I said calmly. I'm ending a performance that's gone on too long. You wanted me gone? Fine. But this isn't your house. It never was. And if I'm leaving, it will be when I choose. Not because I was shamed into it. Cameron stood first. Quietly. Jake followed, picking up his blazer. Within moments, the room began to shift. Conversations turned hushed. Guests gathered purses and coats. No one made eye contact with Elon or Dominica. No one wanted to be caught in the middle. Elon stared at the floor. Dominica turned red, white, then red again. I stood by the door, saying nothing as they passed. Some gave small nods, some mumbled apologies. One woman, Dominica's sister I think, paused just long enough to whisper, "Good for you." 20 minutes later, the house was empty, except for the three of us. Elon, standing in the corner, stunned. Dominica, still by the fireplace, arms crossed, face stone. And me, by the door, holding the microphone like it was a shield. I set it down, walked to the kitchen, pulled the vase of lilies from the counter, and placed them gently back into their paper wrapping. Dominica watched me. You're not staying here tonight? No, I said, but I won't be far. Elon looked up. What does that mean? I didn't answer. I walked back to the hallway, grabbed my coat from the rack, and stepped into the cool night. And as I closed the door behind me, I didn't feel weak. I felt like the wind itself. Cold, steady, and impossible to ignore. The call itself took less than 2 minutes. I stood just inside the front hallway, pressing the phone to my ear, the dial tone a steady pulse in my chest. My voice was calm, measured. The words left my mouth like I'd rehearsed them all my life. Yes, I need officers dispatched to my address. Yes, it's a private residence. There are individuals refusing to leave after being asked to vacate my property. Yes, I am the legal owner of the home. I have documents if needed. No weapons, no threats. Just an unauthorized gathering and refusal to comply with the homeowner's request. Yes, I'll be waiting. The dispatcher was polite, professional, neutral. She didn't know this wasn't just about trespassing. It was about something far older, something stretched thin by 15 years of silent tolerance and hollow gratitude. When I hung up, I set the phone down carefully on the entryway table and looked out the window. Through the sheer curtain, I could already see the shift in the street. Word spreads quickly when a party starts to deflate. Guests leaving early, cars pulling out of the driveway too fast, neighbors pretending not to stare while adjusting porch lights. Inside the house, the change was slower, but inevitable. The guests who had lingered, those who thought I might cool off or that the whole thing was just a dramatic misunderstanding, had gone quiet. Voices dropped, smiles vanished. I could feel the unease thickening like humidity in July. They were beginning to realize this wasn't just a family squabble. This was real, and there were consequences. Cameron had already slipped out, eyes down. Jake followed 5 minutes later, mumbling something about work in the morning. Dominica's sisters packed up the leftover cake and wine without a word, their husbands trailing behind with awkward, forced chuckles. One of them whispered to Dominica on the way out, but I didn't catch it. Her only response was a clenched jaw. I watched them go, one by one. Some offered me tight nods, some avoided me entirely. Elon remained seated on the couch, elbows on his knees, like a man still waiting for someone to come and talk him down. Dominica stood at the kitchen island, glass of red wine untouched beside her. The glass looked ridiculous now, too polished, too celebratory for the bitterness thickening in the room. "I can't believe you actually called them," Dominica muttered. "You asked me to disappear," I said without looking at her. "This is step one." Elon stood abruptly. "Ma, come on. You've made your point." "No," I said. "I've made my decision." The knock at the door was firm, sharp, unmistakable. 3 raps, the kind that silences a room. I opened it without hesitation. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch, their expressions neutral, professional, but alert. Behind them, a few of the neighbors had gathered on their lawns, watching from across the street. Porch lights flickered on, one after another. People noticed things like this in neighborhoods like ours. "Mrs. Moreno?" the taller officer asked. "Yes. Thank you for coming." "They're still here," I said, stepping aside. The officers entered with slow authority. The shorter one looked around the room as if taking mental inventory of the surroundings. The taller one addressed Elon directly. "Sir, we've received a call from the property owner. You've been asked to leave the premises. Can you confirm that you've been informed of this?" Elon blinked. "This is a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "This is my parents' house. I've lived here for years. This is a family matter." "Sir," the officer repeated, "I'm going to ask you one more time. Have you been asked to vacate this residence?" Elon's eyes flicked to me. He looked pale now. "You really want the neighbors to see this? You really want to humiliate your own son?" Dominica stepped forward then, her voice sharp. "This house belongs to us. She's just living in the guest room. She has no authority to do this." The shorter officer stepped beside his partner. "Ma'am, the name on the deed is Angelica Moreno. She is within her rights to request removal of anyone she deems unauthorized." Elon scoffed. "This is insane. You don't arrest people in their own home." "She told you to leave," the officer said calmly. "This is a civil matter now turned criminal. If you refuse to vacate, you will be detained." There was a long pause. Then Dominica laughed. A hollow, panicked laugh. "You're siding with her. You think this sweet old woman has the right to throw us out of our own lives?" The officer didn't respond. Elon ran a hand through his hair. "You're doing this for what, Ma? To get attention? To prove a point?" "No," I said softly. "I'm doing this to finally live in peace." The officers exchanged a look. Then the taller one said, "Sir, ma'am, please stand. We are placing you under arrest for criminal trespass. You can either cooperate now or make this more complicated." Dominica's mouth dropped open. "You're not serious." The handcuffs made a sharp clicking sound as they latched around her wrists. It was the only sound in the room. Elon said nothing as the officers restrained him. his face locked in some terrible space between disbelief and rage. The same son who once cried when I dropped him off at kindergarten now stood handcuffed in his living room because he refused to listen when his mother said, "Enough." The officers led them both outside. I followed slowly, stepping onto the porch as neighbors across the street tried to look casual, arms crossed, phones already recording. Dominica yelled, "She's crazy! She's throwing us out of our own house!" Elon turned back, just once, and locked eyes with me. "Why?" he asked, not with malice, with genuine confusion, like I'd betrayed some unspoken code. "Because you asked me to disappear," I said, and I finally understood what that meant. He didn't respond. They were loaded into the cruiser with practiced ease. The doors shut with a finality that echoed louder than anything else. I stood on the porch for a long time after the car pulled away. The party lights still twinkled weakly above me, but the laughter, the music, the illusion of family, all of it was gone. The silence didn't hurt. It felt honest, like something being peeled back. And yet, a piece of me broke quietly in that moment too. I would never deny it. This wasn't a victory, it was an end. An ending I never wanted, but one I had been forced to see through. There was no pleasure in watching your child led away in handcuffs, no triumph in the sound of a front door closing behind you while the world watches. But there was something else. There was freedom. No more swallowing insults, no more shrinking at the dinner table, no more praying for phone calls that never came. I turned slowly and walked back into the house, my house. I shut the door behind me, locked it with a firm click, and stood in the quiet. It had taken years to arrive here. It had cost me more than I'd ever admit aloud. But for the first time in over a decade, I felt the air around me settle. No expectations, no performances, no shame, just silence, just space, just me, and I wasn't going anywhere. The quiet woke me up the next morning. It wasn't the kind of silence that follows an argument or a storm. It was deeper than that, gentle, still, unthreatening. The kind of quiet I hadn't known in over 15 years. No heels clacking in the hallway, no forced laughter echoing down the stairs. No passive-aggressive thumps of doors shutting just hard enough to sting, but never hard enough to confront. The kind of quiet that lives only in places where hostility has finally left. I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, half expecting Dominica's voice to slice through the walls with her usual morning rehearsals, calls to the salon, scheduling appointments, the clatter of her opinions falling onto Ilon like rain on a leaking roof. But there was nothing. They were both gone, booked, charged, held. The magistrate assigned 14 days in holding for refusal to comply with a lawful order, trespassing, and disorderly conduct in a private residence. It wasn't prison. It wasn't dramatic. It was just enough. Just enough to finally let the air settle in my house. I walked barefoot down the hall that morning, letting the boards creak under my steps without apology. For once, I didn't feel like I had to soften my existence. There was no one downstairs to roll their eyes when I boiled water in the noisy kettle. No one to fake a smile when I asked how they slept. I brewed tea in the old pot, the one Dominica had once called Granny Ceramic, even though it was a wedding gift from my sister, long dead. I poured it into my own favorite mug, the one Elon had chipped years ago and never replaced. I'd glued it back together myself. And then, I sat at the kitchen table, placed a yellow legal pad in front of me, and picked up a pen. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to write another grocery list or birthday calendar or prayer journal entry. I was going to count, not blessings, not resentments, but costs, financial, emotional, and otherwise. I started with what I could remember with certainty: annual groceries and household expenses, $12,000 to $15,000, the first year they moved in. Dominica claimed they just needed a place to land after Elon got laid off. I covered everything: utilities, groceries, toiletries. "We'll pay you back," they said. They never did. After that, it wasn't even discussed. I just kept buying the things we needed. Only we meant everyone but me. Dominica had expensive tastes: imported teas, almond milk, organic snacks for the twins. When I suggested buying in bulk to save, she told me, "We're not savages, Angelica. Car payments and maintenance, $6,000 per year." I gave them my sedan outright, paid off, mint condition. It was too low class, according to her, so they traded it in and bought an SUV. When the first year of insurance came due, Elon asked if I could spot it, just this once. I did. And then every year after that, I paid for maintenance, gas money when they were tight, registration renewals, even new tires. I just never added it up. Renovations, 30,000 plus kitchen upgrades, bathroom remodels, new furniture, all on my dime. Elon said it was an investment in the home, but every invoice was paid with my account. Every design choice came from Dominica's Pinterest board. She used to tell guests it was their project. Never once mentioned that the walls she painted over had been hand-sanded by Noel and me with borrowed tools and aching backs. Holidays, birthdays, travel, $8,000 to $10,000 per year. I paid for all the flights, bought the birthday cakes, covered hotel stays when Dominica insisted she couldn't share a room with the kids anymore. I never complained, even when they ordered drinks I couldn't pronounce or bought matching luggage for a 2-day trip to Tahoe. I smiled in family photos. I wrote thank you cards for gifts I hadn't received. I kept the running total in the margin of the legal pad. Line after line of shame. Over 15 years, it came to more than $250,000. $250,000. Gone. But worse than the money was the silence. The way I let it happen. I gave, and they took, and I convinced myself it was love. But now I saw it for what it was. Not generosity, complicity. I'd made this life easy for them. I'd swallowed their contempt and kept setting the table. I enabled their delusion that what they had was deserved, that support was owed, not offered. And in return, I'd become a prop. The woman in the corner chair, the name on the utility bills, the silent checkbook with wrinkled hands. I looked around the kitchen now, seeing it for the first time without illusion. The glass vase on the counter, Dominica's, not mine. The cold-pressed juicer she never let me touch. The framed quote on the wall, "Gratitude turns what we have into enough." She'd bought it on sale at a home decor store and hung it like a shield, irony and all. I stood and walked through each room. The living room where she criticized my throw pillows. The hallway where he brushed past me without eye contact. The upstairs bathroom where she hid my toiletries in a drawer and replaced my soap with lavender-scented hand foam. I'd let them move in and rearrange the house until it no longer looked like the one Noel and I built together. And I let it happen because I wanted to be included, because I was afraid of being left out, because I thought love meant endurance. I walked back downstairs to the study and opened Noel's old filing cabinet. Inside was a folder labeled simply, House. Deed, mortgage records, insurance policies, all of it in my name. Noel had never removed me from ownership, even when Elon offered to take over the paperwork years ago. Maybe he saw what I didn't. Maybe he knew. Beneath that was another folder, one Noel had labeled in his handwriting, Contingency. Inside was a will, updated 2 years before he died. It granted me full control over all shared assets, even any earnings or property contributed to by Angelica's labor, time, or personal finances. His words. My husband's quiet way of defending me from a future I didn't know was coming. A copy of this had never been given to Elon. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't alone. I had simply forgotten what it felt like to be seen, valued, loved not by my son, but by the man who built this life with me. And now I owed it to him, and to myself, to stop giving it away. No more blank checks. No more dinners they didn't say thank you for. No more tiptoeing around conversations because I didn't want to upset Dominica's perfectly curated moods. I pulled out another sheet of paper and began writing. This time, a new kind of list. Change the locks. Meet with a lawyer about tenancy rights and eviction notices. Reclaim bedroom number 3 as a home office. Donate Dominica's decorative throws and mismatched art pieces. Clean out the garage. List every single monthly expense I would no longer be covering. Each stroke of the pen felt like a reset, a boundary forming, a voice returning. By the time the sun dipped low behind the neighbor's maple tree, the house was still quiet. But now, the silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was a presence. It was mine. I stood in the doorway of Elon and Dominica's bedroom, not their room anymore, and stared at the messy pile of blankets and unwashed coffee mugs on the nightstand. She always said she couldn't think in a messy space, but she never cleaned up. I did. Always me. I wouldn't do it anymore. I backed out of the room and shut the door gently. Not angrily, not loudly, just, finally. In 14 days, they would call. I was sure of it. Dominica would rage, Elon would plead. There would be excuses and fake apologies, and maybe even tears. But I had changed, and I wouldn't explain myself anymore. I had already given them everything. Now I would give myself the one thing they never could: freedom. It was the 3rd morning since they were taken away, and I had slept without earplugs, without tension in my jaw, without the phantom sound of Dominica's passive sighs floating through the vents. The silence no longer startled me. It greeted me, steadied me. I opened the curtains to the morning light and walked barefoot to the kitchen, each floorboard a small reminder that this house, this space, was finally under one name, one rule, one rhythm: mine. I made oatmeal the way I liked it. Full cream, a sprinkle of brown sugar. No watching my portion. No Dominica commenting on simple carbs, or Elon offering to order something instead, like my food embarrassed them. I ate at the table without folding napkins or arranging forks at right angles. And then I picked up the legal pad again, the one where I'd been tallying costs, and stared at the top line of a new page. What stays, what goes, what changes? The answer came to me quicker than I expected. Everything. I thought about it carefully as I washed my mug. They'd be out in 10 days, maybe less if they posted bail. Elon would come back with his shoulders slouched and his voice too soft, saying he didn't mean any of it, that he was sorry I felt hurt. Not that he was sorry he did the hurting. Dominica would speak through her teeth, calm, polished venom, saying the right things while her eyes remained hard and hollow. They'd walk back into my home like it had just been poorly managed in their absence. I couldn't let that happen. This wasn't about revenge. I had no appetite for cruelty, but it was about removal. Clean, permanent, radical. If they wanted me gone from their lives, then I'd leave them the only way they understood, by removing the ground from beneath their feet. So I picked up my phone, opened the search bar, and typed, "local real estate agents near me." The first few listings looked like carbon copies, polished smiles, vaguely inspirational taglines. But one caught my eye. A woman named Serena Knox. Her reviews were glowing but sharp, clear. People described her as relentless, a closer, and professional but not fake. Someone even wrote, "She didn't just sell my house, she hunted down the right buyer and pushed it through like a freight train." That was exactly what I needed. I called her before I could talk myself out of it. "Serena Knox speaking," she answered. Her voice clipped, confident. "Hello, Ms. Knox. My name is Angelica Moreno. I'd like to sell my house. Immediately." "Of course," she replied smoothly. "Have you already listed, or will this be a fresh evaluation?" "Fresh," I said, "and urgent." She didn't ask why. "Send me the address. I'll be there by 3 o'clock. That work for you?" "Yes," I said, already feeling lighter. "Great. And just so you know, if the house has bones and location, I can move it fast. I don't sugarcoat. If you're ready, I'm faster than the ink on the contract." That was the moment I knew I had found my sword. By 2:55 p.m., I had wiped down the counters and opened all the curtains. Not because I wanted to impress Serena, but because I wanted to see this place through someone else's eyes, someone who saw its value without all the history caked in the corners. For too long, I'd tried to preserve it like a shrine. Now, it was a product, an asset. At exactly 3 o'clock, a Navy sedan pulled up. Out stepped a woman in her early 40s, tall, in a clean tan blazer and no-nonsense heels. She had a phone in one hand and a sleek black folder in the other. She didn't knock. She rang the bell once, then waited like a business partner, not a guest. When I opened the door, she smiled. Not fake, not sweet. "Director? Angelica?" I nodded. "Come in." She stepped in and immediately scanned the entryway. "Good bones," she said without pause. "Great light. Original flooring?" "Yes." She walked through each room like she'd lived here in a previous life. Her eyes missed nothing. The width of the hallway, the cabinet depth, the window trim. "No pets?" she asked, checking for wear. "No. No recent roof issues? Mold, termites, foundation cracks?" "No, none." She nodded. "Perfect. I'll do a quick valuation, but I can tell you already, you're sitting on a highly desirable property. Big lot, established neighborhood, updated kitchen. This could move in a week, maybe less, depending on how aggressive you want to price it." I stood with my arms crossed. "I want it fast, fair, but firm. I'm not interested in negotiations. I don't want a bidding war. Just find someone ready to buy. Someone who can take possession within 30 days. Serena raised an eyebrow slightly, but didn't question it. "Let me guess," she said, flipping open her folder. "Divorce? Probate? Retirement?" I met her eyes. "Something like that." That was all she needed. She took photos, measurements, asked for access to the attic and backyard. I watched her work with surgical precision. At one point, she pulled out a tablet and showed me listings in the area. This one sold last week, smaller square footage, less land, and no upgrades. Went in 5 days. You could easily go 30 over asking, but if you want speed, I say price it just under market. We attract serious buyers that way. Cash offers, no contingencies. "Do it," I said. "Whatever gets it done." She looked up, notebook half filled already. "Angelica, I don't usually say this, but I admire when people know what they want. Most sellers are emotional. They stall. Second guess. You're clear." I gave a small smile. "I've been uncertain for 15 years. That was long enough." Serena nodded once, serious. "Then let's do it." By the end of the day, the paperwork was in motion. She sent a notary the next morning to handle signatures. Photos were posted by noon. And within 24 hours, the first showing was booked. I received 3 calls in the first 2 days. One was from Serena, updating me. The others were from the county jail. I didn't answer those. On day 4, Serena called again. "Angelica," she said, "we have a cash buyer. No inspection contingency. Wants to close in 3 weeks. Offers 5% over your ask, no questions." I paused. That was it. That was the number. That was the moment. "Take it," I said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." The contract came through that night. I signed it in the same kitchen where Dominica once told me my tableware was a little dated. Where Elin once said I asked too many questions at dinner. Where I once sat alone while they celebrated themselves in the next room. I signed it without flinching. When I was done, I looked around and realized something simple. I had just sold their sanctuary, their illusion of stability, their entitlement to a place they never earned. The house had once been mine in title. Now it was mine in choice. And soon, it would belong to someone else entirely. I wasn't staying here, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. The house had served its purpose. It had been my marriage, my motherhood, my museum. Now, it was just lumber and walls. And I didn't need it to remember who I was anymore. Serena's voice was clipped but bright the morning she called me. "We've got a signed offer, full cash, 30% over ask. No contingencies. They want a fast close. They're serious." I didn't even blink. "When?" "They're flexible, but I told them you'd want to wrap it up quickly. They can close in 7 days." I hesitated only long enough to look at the wall calendar hanging in the kitchen, Dominica's calendar, with its thick felt marker notes about spa appointments and gym days, both of which I'd silently ignored since the arrests. My eyes went to the square circled in red. Elon and Dominica's scheduled release. 7 days. I smiled, just faintly. Let's set the closing for that Friday. Serena whistled low on the other end. You like precision, I respect that. It wasn't about precision. It was about symmetry. It was about clarity. It was about timing everything down to the second, so they'd walk out of jail and find that the world they'd treated like a free ride had moved on without them. The paperwork flew. Serena worked like a machine. The buyers, a young couple relocating from Boston, wanted everything expedited. They didn't even flinch at the price. Their agent said they had fallen in love with the backyard, the hardwood floors, the tree-lined street. The things I had once loved too, before those things became my prison. I watched the offers finalize from the same kitchen where I had once been told I put the forks in the wrong drawer, where I was once asked not to hover while Dominica reheated store-bought soup and claimed she'd made dinner. There was something beautifully sterile about the sale process. Signatures, notaries, title searches, appraisal reports, cold, neutral forms written in language that made emotion irrelevant. That's what I wanted. A goodbye that left no room for begging, blaming, or bargaining. The morning of the closing, I woke at 6 a.m., hours before the notary was scheduled to arrive. The house was clean, cleaner than it had ever been when they lived in it, though they were always quick to point out my cluttered aesthetic. I had boxed up what little I was taking, mostly photo albums, some of Noel's old tools, and a few mugs with chips no one else would want. The rest I left. Let the new owners decide what stayed and what went. They'd asked if I could leave the living room furniture, Dominica's overpriced leather sectional. I said yes without hesitation. I walked through each room one last time, not to mourn, to confirm. This place, this shell of shared memories, masked contempt, and quietly eroded dignity, was no longer mine. And that was a gift I had given myself. At 9:42 a.m., the notary rang the bell. He was polite, middle-aged, distracted in the way that people doing their job quickly are. I signed the documents in less than 15 minutes. Deed transfer, seller affidavit, settlement agreement. He left with a stack of papers and a smile. By noon, I received confirmation. The house was no longer mine, and just like that, I was free. They were released at 3:10 p.m. I sat in my car 2 blocks away, not to watch, but to time it. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want a speech. But I couldn't deny the final beat of the plan I had carried out. At exactly 3:30, Serena texted me. Buyers received keys. Move-in scheduled for Saturday. Transaction recorded. Transfer completed. Congrats. The law had done the rest. Elon and Dominica returned to a driveway that no longer belonged to them. The key wouldn't work. The locks had been changed the day before, by a locksmith who asked no questions when I handed him a property transfer form and said I wanted the house sealed immediately upon close. I imagined the moment as plainly as if I were standing there. Elon, jiggling the doorknob, checking his phone for messages. Dominica, arms crossed, face pulled tight in disbelief. She wouldn't. She couldn't. And then, maybe, the realization crawling over both of them. I had. And I could. There'd be no police to call this time, no case to make. The deed was filed. The transaction was sealed. The new owners had already taken a video of their toddlers running through the empty living room. There was no legal foothold, no appeal, no technicality to save them. It was over. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely. And when the panic came, because I knew it would, I wouldn't be there to catch it. They would call, of course. They would leave voicemails or write long, finger-pointed texts. Elon would try to summon the past, and Dominica would try to shame the present. But all they'd find was a number no longer in service. because I had changed that too. New phone, new address, new name on the mailbox. I had left no breadcrumbs behind, only consequences. That evening, I checked into the small rental cottage I had reserved under my maiden name. A quiet place just outside the city, with creaking floors and an old stone fireplace. It smelled like cedar and rain. The furniture was mismatched, soft, used. I loved it immediately. I made tea and unpacked one small box. Just my clothes, some photos, a notebook, and a copy of Noel's will. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I breathed fully. No weight on my chest. No pressure to be charming or agreeable or useful. I didn't have to ask anyone if they wanted dinner. I didn't have to excuse myself for existing. The silence wasn't heavy. It was mine. Somewhere, they were calling my name, trying to untangle the timeline, trying to trace the steps that led to a locked door, a sold house, a mother they could no longer reach. But there was nothing left to explain. I had heard Dominika say the words, "I wish she would just disappear." And now I had. Not as a ghost, but as a woman who learned at last how to leave a house full of strangers without slamming the door. Elon had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Dominika had only imagined it one way. Her way. That they would walk back into their life like it was a movie, paused on mute, and now the sound would return. The music would swell, and everything would continue just as it had. They had rehearsed it, even. "We'll come in through the front, change, and then call your mother," Dominika had said on the ride back from the jail. "We'll make her feel crazy for what she did. Not angry, not vengeful, just crazy. That's how you win. She won't say no once we're back inside," Elon had said. "She just wants attention. She doesn't have the nerve to actually kick us out." They laughed. They held hands in the back of the cab like people who thought they had outsmarted consequence. Neither of them carried bags. They didn't need to. Their whole life, wardrobes, electronics, skincare regimens, memories, their children's baby shoes, Dominika's ridiculous copper pans, and imported incense sticks, was at the house. Their house, as they had long called it, though the deed had never said so. When the cab turned onto the street, Dominika leaned toward the window. "Look," she said, eyes narrowing. "There's someone in the yard." Elon frowned. "Do we have guests? A gardener? Did she throw a pity barbecue or something?" But the man in the front yard was not a guest. He was wearing work gloves and a paint-splattered t-shirt, setting down boxes on the porch with a child at his side. Inside, through the front window, they could see a woman, blonde, mid-30s, hanging sheer curtains over the windows. "What the hell?" Elon said, pushing the cab door open before the car even stopped fully. Dominika was right behind him. They rushed up the driveway like people chasing a thief, but the strangers didn't flinch. The man in the yard turned toward them casually, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Hey there," he said, confused but calm. "You lost?" Elon stepped forward, eyes flicking between the porch and the man. "What are you doing here?" The man raised an eyebrow. "Moving in." Dominika let out a brittle laugh. No, this is our house, our home." The woman inside the house waved through the window, smiling gently as she turned away to unpack another box. The man scratched the back of his neck. "You're Elon, right?" Elon froze. "Yeah?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. It had been sitting on the edge of the mailbox, under a small paperweight. On the front was a name written in calm, familiar cursive. Elon. "Someone left this for you," the man said, handing it over. Elon took it slowly. His fingers trembled as he peeled it open. Inside was a single note. No card, no money, no long explanation, just 5 sentences. "Your wife wanted me to disappear. I disappeared. The house has been sold. There is nothing here for you anymore. Now you are free. Mother." Elon stood silent for a long time, just reading it again and again, like the words would rearrange themselves into something softer if he looked long enough. They didn't. Dominica snatched it from his hands and read it aloud again, like it was a joke, like there was a camera crew hiding behind the hedges, and this was all some reality show twist. "She sold it?" she said, her voice cracking in disbelief. "She actually sold it?" The man on the lawn looked genuinely sympathetic now. "Sorry, we closed on Friday. It was handled by a woman named Serena. Said everything was urgent. Said the place needed a clean slate." Dominica shook her head violently. No, she can't do that. This was our house, my garden, my kitchen. The twins' room is upstairs. This was our home." "It was hers," the man corrected gently. "Now it's ours." Elon stepped forward, as if the door might somehow change its mind. He pulled a key from his pocket, the same key he'd used for over a decade, and slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. He tried again. And again. Nothing. He stared at the doorknob like it had betrayed him, like the house should have known who he was. Dominica's face crumpled. She turned in a half circle, scanning the lawn, the driveway, the porch, where she once sipped wine and criticized my flower choices. "She really did it," she whispered. "She really walked away from us." Elon dropped the key. It hit the steps with a small, final sound. Then he sat down slowly on the bottom stair, head in his hands. He didn't speak. Dominica stood over him, holding the note like it burned. "She blindsided us," she said. "She set this up while we were—" She cut off, unable to finish. Elon looked up, eyes red already. "No, she didn't." "What?" "She didn't blindside us. She gave us exactly what we asked for." Dominica's lips parted, but no words came. He looked at the note again, still in her hands. "Now you are free," he repeated. "That's what she wrote." "Free!" Dominica hissed. "Free from what? From being a mother? From helping us?" Elon wiped his face, shaking his head. "Number free from us." Dominica stared at him, eyes wide, almost afraid. "You're siding with her now." "No," he said. "I'm just seeing it." He looked up at the new homeowners again. They were carrying boxes inside now, laughing gently, the woman bouncing her toddler on her hip. It wasn't just the house that had been taken. It was the illusion that they were irreplaceable. Elon bent his head again, his shoulders heavy. Dominica stepped back like she'd been slapped. "I'm calling a lawyer. She can't do this. I'll ruin her." Elon didn't answer. He just sat there, quiet. Not out of pride. Out of recognition. Because in that moment, he finally realized something I had known for years, but only just found the strength to act on. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who has nothing left to protect, except herself.